Hello and welcome to the Worn and Wound podcast. My name is Zach Kazan. I'm the managing editor at Worn and Wound. I'm joined today by Worn and Wound co-founder Zach Weiss. Zach, how's it going?
Very well, very well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Always good to see you on the pod. And I'm also joined by Worn and Wound contributor Griffin Barch. Griffin, great to see you again. This is the second time you've been on the pod in a couple of months. It's good to have you back.
Yeah, it's always fun. It's always chaotic. Hopefully this is slightly more restrained than last time. But
last time was in person. We were all in person, and it was a very chaotic episode. There was a lot of egg conversation in that.
There was a lot of egg conversation.
The infamous egg episode.
Yeah. We're not gonna talk eggs in this episode. We'll save that.
But they're so relevant right now.
Yeah.
Even more so than last time.
Yeah.
Well, listen, if folks want to hear us have egg corner, maybe leave us a comment and let us know and we can figure something out. But eggs are not on the agenda today. Today we're talking about kind of like reacting to the reaction to a piece that Griffin wrote like a couple of weeks ago on his Vertex Aqualine. And there's also a great video that he made on that watch that we'll, of course, link to in the show notes. As always, we got lots of, good comments and good discussion on YouTube and on social media. And I think there was a string of comments. It wasn't like the majority of comments necessarily, but they were very like present in my mind that we're kind of along like a very similar line. And I think it warrants discussion. So we'll get to that in a second. But before we do, let's do a quick wrist check. Griffin, let's start with you. What are you wearing today?
Well, despite the topic of conversation today, I'm not actually wearing my Vertex because I got a new watch yesterday for the first time in a while.
Oh, congrats.
And
watch alert right here on the pod.
Yeah. And it's the new CWC CN. Yeah. It's the new CWC CN1 or CWN1. It's the new Graynado CWC quartz diver.
Yeah.
It's a FXD style titanium take on the Royal Navy diver that CWC has been doing forever with a high accuracy quartz movement and a 12-hour bezel. And it's just wildly good.
Yeah. Congratulations. That's a pretty cool watch. This is a limited edition watch that the folks at the Graynado, James Stacy and Jason Heaton, made for their Slack community, for the TGN Slack. And I was amazed at how well everyone kept this a secret until the watch was like they asked folks to like not discuss it like outside of the Slack, and like they really did. Like this didn't like pop up and at least in the Instagram accounts I read or the Facebook groups or whatever. Like it was really it speaks to their community. I think that folks were willing to kind of like keep it on the DL for as long as they did.
Yeah, and it's one that it's not that they were necessarily actively hiding it. I first saw the prototype at Wind Up in Chicago last year because Jason brought the prototype. So if you were there, you could have gotten a little bit of a preview for it. But it does feel like something special. And I think if you were to go into the TGN Slack, the community that's built up around the watch inside of the broader community is really cool to see.
Yeah, no, that's great. Congratulations on the pickup. CWC is a cool brand. That watch just makes so much sense for TGN. It's like
it's so TGN.
Yeah.
The second I saw, I was not aware of this until I saw it on social media just the other day, and I was just like, if you could almost like, in almost like a stereotypical way, like define these people by a watch, they did it. I mean, they found it. And that's good. They really know who they are. They made the right watch.
Yeah.
So
and true to me, I'm not actually wearing it on a Graynado. I put it on one of the Watches of Espionage Glomar Velcro straps that are kind of based off the Tudor FXD straps. And it's really, really good on everything I've tried it on.
Very nice. Very nice. Cool. I'm sure seems like that's an appropriate strap combination for that watch. Maybe that watch like kind of fits into the conversation that we're about to have in certain ways. So I think that's a appropriate pick. Zach, how about you? What are you wearing today?
I have on my Ming 3707 Monolith that I got last year. This has been on my wrist quite a lot in the last few months. It's I don't know, it's very cold here in New York City. I've been definitely drawn to wearing a lot of like matte black stuff, and this watch has just suited the mood. It's also it's very thin and very like smooth pebble shape on both the top and bottom. And so like it works really well for like a lot of cuffs, which
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see my sweater right now. It's a very tight cuffed sweater. It's anything large is kind of uncomfortable. So
Sure.
And Zach, that's one of the ones with the really great kind of lume mosaic dials, right?
yeah, it has the subtle mosaic in the middle of it, which does glow if you charge it up. Yeah, it's a lovely watch.
That's a really cool watch. Yeah.
Excellent. I'm wearing my my Louis Gerard X Kudoke regulator with a mother of pearl dial. Yeah, I don't know. It had been a while since I had put this on, and I thought today's the day for a little mother of pearl action. To your point, Zach, it's been quite cold and gray and miserable and snowy and just not my favorite type of weather, here in the Northeast. And so I kind of like have been leaning into the, watches on straps that feel more kind of like wintry. This dial is not, it's very bright and kind of like, I think of it as like more of like a spring summer type dial, but yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to make the most of these leather strap watches before we get to the point where I'll just be sweating through them, all summer. And it's bracelets and rubber for the duration. So, all right, let's talk about Vertex, Griffin. So you reviewed the Vertex Aqualine, your personal watch, on the website not too long ago. And for folks who maybe haven't read that review or seen the video, I was wondering if you could just kind of like give us your kind of like bullet point top line takeaways of the watch and like why it is, like a special watch to you, and what makes it kind of a watch that's like worth 3,000 word review in an 8-minute video on the website.
Yeah, well, I mean, I fully admit a 3,000 word review is always a little excessive, but that I feel like is kind of the nature of our vibe.
Yeah,
but
nothing's excessive.
But the idea with the Vertex is when I got it because it seemed like a really cool take on like the very classic formula of a black dial, black bezel, steel dive watch at around 40-ish, 42 millimeters. And the watch became the watch for me. Became the watch that I wear almost every day. It stopped me from buying watches in a real way for over a year. It got me to sell watches, and it became what I was calling my home base watch. Like the watch that was the watch that gave me the space to enjoy everything else, and that meant I didn't really have to think about it in the morning. And that's all because it's just a watch that gets everything right.
Mm-hmm.
At least for me. It's a great size. It's really comfortable. It's robust. It has literally the best bezel I think I've ever used. And its lume just makes me happy.
Yeah.
And it's just a watch that as soon as I had it, it seemed like it made sense. And I couldn't come up with a reason why it didn't. And I've just fallen more and more in love with it over the year and a half that I've had it.
Yeah. It's a really solid watch. I've had a chance to handle yours, and I've of course seen them at wind-ups and other events when when Vertex comes to wind up. I like your idea too of a home base watch. Zach, do you have a home base watch, or do you think that
I was just thinking about that, and like I feel like I'll have watches that maybe rotate as the most worn for certain periods of time, but I don't have a singular home base watch. I do really like that idea. It sounds very soothing in a way. I would say if anything, it's maybe my Black Bay 54, because I think we made this comment last year after Watches and Wonders, but like after being bombarded with so much stuff, you kind of want like a palate cleanser.
Sure.
So I thought of it as a palate cleanser watch, but maybe it's sort of the home base too. It's like it reroutes my sensibilities because it's straightforward.
Yeah. I kind of I also like it'd be hard for me to identify like a home base watch in the way that you described it, Griffin, just because I think I tend to gravitate towards kind of more just kind of like unusual watches, maybe that like are not necessarily like inherently daily wear watches. Like I love this Louis Gerard with the mother of pearl dial, but like this is not a watch that's like meant to be worn, every day. It's kind of a strange thing. But I also kind of think of my Tudor, my Tudor Black Bay with the burgundy bezel as kind of the watch that, like, if I've said this before, but like in a hypothetical situation where I decided I'm out of watches, I'm out of the hobby, I'm selling everything, and I'm just keeping one for like, pure functionality to tell the time and to kind of just be like an accent piece with the clothes I'm wearing. Like the Black Bay is probably the one that stays because it's the one that makes the most sense to kind of like, wear every day and just like be the watch that you own forever. So that's kind of like what I sort of like gotten to think of when you use the term home base watch. But yeah, I like that concept. I think it makes a certain amount of sense, and I think if like push comes to shove, like most watch collectors can probably think of like, even if it's not a watch that they have in their collection currently, like a kind of an ideal sort of watch that they would return to.
Yeah, and I think there's also something to what Zach said about having a palate cleanser, especially when you're fortunate enough to be in our position where we get to experience a lot of stuff that's really outside of our normal on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
Having something to come back to is always just kind of nice.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that it can be almost like overwhelming to have to kind of like think about so many different watches and evaluate them and write about them. And it's nice to have something that you like, that is kind of like waiting there for you at the end of that period. So the review's great. I think you do a really nice job of like articulating, why you like the Vertex and why it's successful in what it sets out to do. I'm going to read some comments from our YouTube, from the YouTube review, which again we'll link to, and I'm not going to like apply usernames to any of these because no one necessarily. I mean, they're public, but no one expected to be called out publicly. But these comments to me all have kind of like a similar vibe to them. Okay, so here we go. $3,700 for this watch is insane, all caps. Vertex is asking Tudor money. Another comment. Great looking watch at a discordant price for the finishing and movement. Another comment. It is insanely overpriced. There's that word again. Insane. And then another one that I think is the one that maybe is like the best starting point or a starting point for conversation is another ridiculously priced micro. Which, as someone who had like, who really, I mean, I love micro brands. You kind of like, it's sort of a prerequisite to like, working at Worn and Wound. You have to kind of have like a appreciation for these like small brands, and like understand why they're important in the community and so forth. And so like that one in particular, just like really kind of got me. But I don't know. I guess we can lead off the discussion here with: is this a micro brand? And is it fair to criticize a micro brand for being over a certain price point? Because I kind of tend to think it's not, because not all brands are the same, and everyone's costs are different and goals are different. And micro brand is a sort of like made up term anyway, and it's like it's all just very elastic. So I don't know that there's a real threshold here for pricing, but I don't know. Griffin, what's your takeaway when you see those comments about a watch that, like, I'm sure to you is worth like every dollar of the price you paid for it based on what you wrote?
Oh, it absolutely is to me. And I mean, the first thing to kind of get out of the way is that a lot of people go to the Vertex website and they look at it, and the thing that jumps out, and this is based on the design of the website, is they look at it in US dollars and it says that the watch is almost $3,700. And the reality is it's not that in the United States, because that's the price converted from British pounds with VAT added,
Oh, okay.
which we don't pay. So for one thing, the Vertex in the United States is really more like $3,000, which, that's a $700 difference. It's no small thing. And it kind of, to me, puts it in a different place. But also, like you, I kind of struggle with the argument that a micro brand can't get too expensive. And part of my logic for that is we have this seemingly wide, fuzzy band that exists between a micro brand and an independent brand, when really they're the same thing. I mean, most micro brands make more watches than Rexep or Rexepi makes in a year. We would never dream of calling Rexep a micro brand watchmaker. So it's a little bit of an ill-defined term at best.
Yeah. It is Vertex a micro brand? So to me, I think of Vertex is a historic brand. They were, kind of like brought back to life by Don Cochran, who's, related to the, original owners of the brand. But like, there's a heritage here. It's not like it's not like I feel like there's a difference between a brand that's been around since, early 20th century and a brand new creation. Zach, do you have thoughts on we talk a lot about the difference between micro and indie and people who use micro brand as a pejorative. What are your thoughts kind of seeing those comments?
I'm always battling the definition myself. Not because I don't want to use it, but because I just want to understand it and know that I'm using it at least in a way that I mean it correctly. Because when you say micro brands, sometimes you look at brands and Rexepi is a good example, perhaps, or even ones that are perhaps a little bit closer in price point and accessibility. And I'm totally blanking on every brand ever, but I don't know, maybe Louis Erard is a good example, right? Why would I not call Louis Erard a micro brand, which I don't think I would at first blush, versus a Laurier, who's a brand that we love and I think happily would be called a micro brand. And I don't know why I feel that way specifically. I'm starting to, and actually mentioned this to you earlier, Zach, but thinking of micro brand more as an attitude and a approach and a philosophy almost in making watches, rather than something that is defined by the quantity of watches you make, the price point of the watches, etc. And of course, I do think there's little things that make it more common, like the fact that Vertex does have a long history, but it also didn't exist for a long time. Right. And the spirit of the way the brand is run right now is there's a single person behind it. Well, he has a staff, but you can go meet Don at an event and it's him pushing this brand forward. It's not a board. It's not, a publicly traded company kind of a thing.
Right.
And what he wants to do with it, I don't know. It's it's his art to create, sort of. Whereas Louis Erard, and I don't know, because I love Louis Erard watches, I don't want it to be it's like Louis Erard is kind of like a broader thing. They're available at retail. They kind of have more of a global positioning on their product. They're also an old brand, though they've really reestablished, and they feel a little bit more like that, capital I indie kind of a thing, because it's sort of at a different commercial level. If that makes sense. This all could change tomorrow. Every definition I'm saying, but I like thinking about it a little bit more as a little bit of a renegade spirit of some kind. I don't think you'd calling a brand mom and pop brand feels weird. Calling them grassroots feels, but it all kind of gets to the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So the micro brand to me, it's it is independent. It is operating outside of the sphere of influence of these larger companies and corporations, and they're doing things their own way. In terms of price point and things like that, I mean, it's so tough, because you have some watch brands, especially in the last decade, that have strived to make the most high value of inexpensive thing. Right. And they've done so under the name of a micro brand. But as a small manufacturer, you're going to get higher prices. So it's difficult. You want to make a high-end Swiss chronometer dive watch and meet every, not really cave on any detail, any quality you want, you're going to pay for that as a brand. So I don't know. I see $3,000. I'm not at all surprised by that.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I hear. Obviously, like we see that type of comment all the time. Like literally, like every watch that we write about. Like there's someone who thinks it's too expensive. It's like the oldest joke. Like every watch is too expensive. Like we get it. That's sort of like where the community is at this point, or at least little pockets of people in the community attached to certain ideas of about what a watch should cost. But like for this watch in particular, it's hard for me to imagine someone like handling it and seeing it in person and thinking that like even 3,700, like the price that you see on the website, is like not a fair price. Like $3,000 frankly seems like a steal, like like more than fair. Like like you said, Griffin, like the loom is fantastic. The like the quality of the machining and like the finishing is like just very, very good. It is like, to me, like Tudor level. The action of the bezels is great. Like I still remember that, like the bezel action from like the first time I handled a Aqualion. So like when people say like Vertex is asking Tudor money, I'm like, well, yeah, it's like it's kind of comparable to a Tudor. Like it makes sense.
And in fact, when I bought my Vertex, I was directly cross-shopping it with the Pelagos 39, and I chose the Vertex over the Tudor.
Yeah.
Just because it felt to me a little bit more like a cohesive package. And frankly, I mean, Vertex is a small brand, and I like supporting those small brands. The Tudor AD I was talking to was not going to have an issue moving the Pelagos 39 the day after I walked out of the boutique.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really fun to me to be able to buy a watch and be able to talk to Don about it, talk to other enthusiasts, which there aren't that many who have Vertexes, who all get excited anytime I post it on Instagram or talk about it on the site. And that is also worth some money to me, like that connection.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I was going to ask, before you mentioned it, like if you had any like concerns about like putting your money into a Vertex as opposed to a Tudor, but it sounds like just the opposite, that you were like, happy to do that.
I admit I probably would have been a little more hesitant to put my money into the Vertex, weirdly, if it had an in-house movement. That I wasn't sure if the brand was necessarily going to last forever. Maybe that puts a ceiling on how much it can get fixed over time. But I actually think this is exactly the watch where I want an off-the-shelf movement. It has it. It's cost certified. It keeps perfect time. And when I do eventually need to have someone look at it, I'll be able to get it looked at anywhere, which takes a lot of the worry out of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that goes into the conversation about like what we value in a watch. How do you see that like kind of shaking out, Zach? Like we have all these, you have like watches at all these price points. Like I'll give you an example. When I think I reposted, Griffin, your like the Instagram like reel that we made of your video, and someone responded to it and said like that's a great watch, but is it worth $3,000 just to me privately? And I said like I think it is, and I responded back like I'm curious, like what would make it worth $3,000 to you? And we had like a nice conversation. I think he asked the question in good faith, and he brought up Formex, which is another brand that I think is a little more aggressively priced than the Vertex. They're less expensive, but they have access to like more manufacturing. They have a stake in their own manufacturing. They manufacture for other brands, so they benefit from that economy of scale. And I think
massively,
yeah.
I mentioned, yeah.
So I just like I wonder like how you approach sort of like thinking about like value for dollar. Like is it I mean honestly
I think I don't know. I think it's just, what are you willing to pay?
Yeah.
At a certain point, it's just like, if you're not willing to pay $3,000 for this watch, then don't.
Mm-hmm.
They can just walk away and find the other thing. But if you're comfortable with it, then it's not like you think you're throwing money out the door and you're okay with that. It's that you see the value there,
Mm-hmm.
period. And if somebody, I think about Tudor's pricing a lot, because they really dominated that $3,000 to $5,000 price point for a while. And, I think if you're comparing them, and other than, I think, Griffin, you get a great example, you kind of lean towards wanting that independent brand spirit of Vertex. But if you are going to go like dollars for donuts between two, just get the Tudor. You know what I mean? Like, a small brand isn't going to compete with the giant machine that is Tudor.
Right.
They have two of their own buildings in the Luck. One's, it's like, it's a giant company. You cannot pit them against each other. So they can make a product that's outstanding. I would say weigh them against Omega and see where you come out, because that's more an equivalent. But, also to that point, it's just like, you're gonna have this argument here. Are you gonna take that to Rolex? Are you gonna take that to Panerai? Are you gonna take that to, any of these big brands that seem to get sometimes adoration without any complaint, when I can't necessarily see them doing something that's actually suggestive of the price that they're charging once you factor in the economies of scale, right? Once you factor in the fact that they own their tooling, that they've, amortized it forever, and that they raise their prices every year X percentage. It's like, so complain about that. I don't know. Take your fight where it belongs, kind of.
Yeah, those are also, I mean, some of those brands that you're, that you're thinking of. They're also like, they're pure luxury companies, also, that are just like the margins that they're asking are just like so much greater. And that's the other like thing that I always kind of hear like under the surface of these questions is like, these micro brands don't deserve to make money. Like they,
I was going to say the same thing.
I really like that's something that I just can't stand. Like Don Cochran and anyone who like owns a brand and runs it themselves has a right to like feed their children and pay their mortgage and like do all the things that like we're able to do because we have jobs and if that like that to me is just absurd. Like the idea that like these brands, because they're making like a specialized product and it's like it's all just a hobby for all of us, only deserve to break even is I don't know, like I just find that kind of like offensive. Like honestly, it's like it's not a good way to kind of approach these things.
100% do too. And I accidentally got like a little like agitated a few months back in a conversation that I think was really not meant to agitate anybody, like on our Slack. And I apologize to the people because it sort of implied that. And it's just like, these large brands are charging 7 to 10 to maybe even in the teens X cost, right? Like I imagine Vertex is in the 3 to 5 range, and I would say, go higher, like, yes, like you're making a luxury good. Also make enough money to buy yourself luxury products too, live well, pay it's as well as give yourself runway to develop more. We've seen brands get caught up in that, especially in the earlier Kickstarter days when people were really undercutting themselves and they didn't really have money to develop the next thing. And so you're stuck in this cycle and they couldn't get out of it, and it's like, that's purely a margin thing. Like your business plan didn't work. And it's not a favor. You're making a luxury product. I don't know.
Yeah. And actually you think about that kind of, a lot of these brands, because of that, they're trying to get attention. They underprice their first watch. And then very few of them can make that transition into profitability over time and keep growing what they're doing. And I think Ming, which you have on your wrist, is a great example of that. The first Ming watches were completely, like, truly affordable watches. And I don't think any of us, I mean, was the first Ming under $1,000?
Well, they did two at once. He did a high-end one, which I forget what that cost, between 10 and 20, and launched a $700 one. And I mean, now the lowest you're going to find a Ming for is 3. I think, and or maybe more.
Very few brands these days, especially young brands, are given that latitude to grow as the watches get better.
Introducing Dorenzo DRZ07 Universo, launching March 1st. Discover timeless elegance for every wrist with the Swiss-made DRZ07 Universo, a design that transcends boundaries. With its perfectly balanced 37.5mm diameter, the DRZ07 Universo is neither too small nor too large, it's just right. Whether you're a seasoned collector or new to the world of horology, this versatile watch is designed to fit effortlessly on any wrist. The DRZ07 Universo is more than just a timepiece. It's a statement of design, craftsmanship, and versatility. To learn more about the Universo, please visit DorenzoWatches.com. That is DIRENZO watches.com. Now, back to the episode.
And that's another thing is that as some of like the big luxury brands increase their prices, introduce more SKUs, like, are the watches getting better? Like, I would argue, like, not necessarily. They're incentivized a lot of times to cut costs and to like put out a product that's not as good as the one that they made last year or the year before that. And it's different, I think, in the world of micro brands and independents who cater to an enthusiast market that is, like, frankly, just like more discerning than a mass market luxury customer. And we'll pick something apart a lot more. But that's something that, like, I've Zach, I'm sure you've found too with like the some of the watches that come through the office, like they get more expensive, but like they don't get better necessarily, which is a frustrating
100%.
thing that I think affects a lot of different businesses, a lot of different areas. But like we definitely see it in luxury watches for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I keep coming back to Tudor, but it's just relevant to a podcast we recorded the other week where the Pelagoses are now over 5K.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a mental line there for me, at least at 5, and though it's 5,200 or something, and not, it's like, it's a different proposition at that point. It's no longer this under 5K thing. It, like steel kind of, it's getting up there. I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's the same watch, to your point, and yeah, massive company once again, though they did report a pretty steep decline apparently in sales last year. So.
I saw that. I saw the headline. I didn't dig into the article, but yeah, sales are down at Tudor apparently.
But even, I mean, the Pelagos is now over 5K. The Black Bay 41, Zach, which you have, is now butting right up against that. So even, and I think, that we're probably going to see a new version of the Black Bay 58 at some point in the next few years that brings it in line with the updates other watches have gotten. And I fully expect to see that climb as well and probably be closer to that high $4,000 mark.
Yeah. Is that a point? Like, does that give you pause, like as a collector, as an enthusiast, when it comes to Tudor specifically? Because like I think I really like my Black Bay. I think that that Black Bay is like like I hold it in my hand, I wear it on my wrist, like it feels like a $5,000 watch to me, or 45, whatever it costs. Like I feel like I I got my money's worth with that watch because it's a quality product. But do you feel like do you feel like, how much room do they have to like keep going up and not improve before you're like, well, this is getting out of hand?
Well, I think the idea that they're not improving is also not something I totally ascribe to.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, the new Black Bay 41s are like MEDAS certified and thinner and have a better case architecture. So, and the reality is life's just more expensive now. And I'm not sure I again, to Zach's earlier point, if you're willing to pay for the watch, then it's the right price. And I think that calculus can shift if you're someone who's buying watches with the intention of selling them, as opposed to someone who kind of commits to watches and holds on to them for a long time. And if I get asked this question all the time, what watch should I buy? And it's like, okay, well, do you want a sports watch or a kind of dressier thing? And I send people to either Grand Seiko or Tudor almost every time. And both those brands have gotten more expensive.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I don't think they're still a great value for what you're getting.
Yeah. I do think that point you made earlier, Zach, is really kind of like the center of it. Is, if you like it, it's worth it to you. If you don't like it, obviously it's not the watch for you. Like all these people who are in the comments saying like this watch is too expensive, like it's at some level like that's not the watch for them. Like they, it's not a watch that they would consider.
And yeah, I mean, it just comes down also to the style of collector you are. If you're even a collector per se, like buying multiple pieces, like I say this as somebody who has bought a pre-owned Lange, which is, I don't even know how to ascribe value to that watch. You know what I mean? Is it worth it? I just don't know. I just don't know if it was worth the price I paid. I mean, I'm also, well, whatever. I don't even getting into that, but like, I'm very happy with it. It was an achievement to buy it. It was meaningful. It's a stunning watch. It costs what it costs because it's what it is. I'm not buying Picasso's. You know what I mean? But it's like, it's just, I don't value it so loose. But it's interesting though. Like, I think part of it's a little bit also like when you get into this stuff and how long you're around. So like watching prices go up is hard. I think, I think Speedmasters have doubled in price since I've gotten into this.
Literally, they've like just about doubled. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, now, yes, they are coaxial medicine, whatever, but for a while it was kind of iterative. And is that still worth that much more? I don't know. For me though, with Tudor, it's that $3,000 to $5,000 price point that I think is just really interesting. And I felt like there was a strength to them owning it. And if they start to move up and out of it, you're getting, once you're in the 5 to 7 range, it's just a different customer, a different attitude. And maybe that's where they want to be, and that's fine. And, as their products improve, maybe it'll make more sense. The silver lining there is it opens it up more for smaller independent brands, which they have to deal with more expensive everything too. So, I think you're going to be seeing a lot more $3,000 quote unquote micro brands over the coming years. I don't know. Once again, the definitions are all absurd, but like if you think of like Furlan Marie as a micro brand or not, I mean they released the UFO watch last year, which had some modifications to a movement which were super cool, like decorative modifications, and that's approaching 28.3, I think, around there. It's a beautiful watch.
Did people complain about the price of that? Like, I'm sure they did.
I mean, I'm assuming somewhere they did, but I'm sure, But it's just they went from a $500 Mega Quartz or whatever it was to a $3,000 manual. So it's a bit of a leap up.
Yeah. It's interesting you to talk about like how the length of time in the hobby like impacts your point of view on this. When I think about it from that perspective, I think about how not just how like prices have gone up, but how I've just gotten like more comfortable with my taste as like years go by, and I'm more comfortable like paying more money, frankly, for watches that like I know I'm gonna really like and cherish and hang on to. And I think that's probably at least part of the calculus that you made with your Lange, is that like that's a watch you've aspired to for a long time. Like you really know yourself as a collector at this point. It's
I also don't have kids. I don't have house payments. I don't have a car. I really am like detached from responsibility in this world. So it works for me,
Yeah. I have a similar outlook. I was joking with someone the other day that thinking about like a custom, like, one-off watch, that I'm like sort of considering, and I think I'd get no kids engraved on the back of it because it's the only way you can really justify these things.
Yeah, dual income, 2 cats. Yeah, that's my life. Yeah.
Well, then here's a question for you as well with these kinds of watches, because both Zachs, you have watches that some people would consider real end game pieces, stuff that people would really pursue. But you have them in this context. When you come across a watch like the Lange 1, was price the first thing that went through your mind when you were evaluating it? Or did you judge the watch and price come in later? Because I know for me, price is usually one of the last things I consider with a watch when I'm evaluating it for the first time.
I mean, the price, a number was there because there was just a literal a number I couldn't go past, you know. So I just had a limit on it, like a physical limit, not a limit of will, if you will, if you will. So, but when I was actually choosing the watch, it became down to a set of specifications that I wanted from a watch that I was going to spend that much money on. You know, I learned from having some yellow gold watches that, as beautiful as they are, I don't want to wear them as often, as I feel like things that cost that much money should be worn. White metal makes more sense to me. So I landed on a white metal black dial with a date. It was like, which is super practical, right? That's like your Vertex, right?
Yeah.
But it wanted it in a Longa.
It's the same thing.
Hey, no date on my Vertex.
Oh, it's a no date? Okay. But, you know, so it's really where that intersected with price and availability. So, and I mean, it's, be clear, it's pre-owned. This is like almost half the price of what a new Longa One goes for. So, yeah. I mean, it's, I don't know, you convince yourself of this stuff as you go along, you know, and
Yeah.
it's like, and I'm not convincing myself of buying another watch in that price point, even close. You know, I'm trying to trade a watch right now, thinking of trading a watch towards a watch that costs, you know, still a lot more than I used to pay, but not a 5-figure even watch. You know what I mean? It's like, and I don't know. That's the constant, that's the transaction. That's the currency. That's where I usually am, just moving these pieces around to constantly try things, sort of a situation.
I would say like a good chunk of my day, pretty much on any random day, is just like spent doing the math in my head of like, you know, can I afford this? Like, can I trade for this? Like, what is it? What would it mean to own this? And like to answer your question, Griffin, about price, like, you know, like I always, like, I'm always aware of the price, but I really try to, I don't know, maybe it's a bit naive, but like I try to accept that like the brands, especially if they're like independent brands or micro brands, are being like fair to a certain extent with their with their customer, and you know, I try to like do my due diligence and try to figure out like, you know, where things are made and how they're made, and, you know, like who's making what, and like that all kind of like is part of the stew that goes into like determining if something is like a quote unquote good value. But ultimately, like, you know, like we've been talking about, it all goes back to like, do I like the watch? And you know, it's a formula that like changes with every single watch, I think, ultimately. Which is part of the reason why these like reflexive sort of like it's too expensive comments just like sort of gnaw at me, because like you're seeing a photo, you're seeing a render, you know, like on Instagram or whatever. You know, you haven't like held this watch in your hand, you haven't spent time with it. You know, you don't necessarily like know, you know, like where it comes from or the story behind it. Like there's so many, you know, so many unknowns, and you're just, you know, to dismiss it as, you know, that's Tudor money. It's to me quite silly.
And I think we all have had the experience of picking up a watch, finding out the price, and being like, okay, this doesn't line up. But broadly speaking, if I walk around Windup, I feel like most of the watches I encounter are priced really well from these small brands, and priced where they kind of feel they should be.
Yeah.
Yep.
I agree with that.
I honestly,
I think most of the brands like do a pretty good job of like understanding what their customers are like going to pay and offering them like fair value. Like I truly do think that about the micro brand scene.
yeah, I mean, you're not going to be a successful brand at like marketing your product if you don't understand the marketplace, right? So it's like, sure, you can charge more and charge what you want to charge, but if you're charging 10K for something that you can literally, you know, find every single component the same, there's no additional handwork, there's no, you know, like in a $1,500 watch, like you're just trying to go for branding, or like a luxury feel. You know, but honestly, you know, at this point, I feel like not too many watches come into the office or we see get released by the micro brands and smaller independents that I'm like, oh, that is crazy. What are they doing?
Right.
It really comes down to like, is there, you know, do I think this is interesting or not, or just appealing, or, you know, whatever. But, you know, there's some brands at Watches and Wonders, large brands and smaller brands that sometimes the prices are shocking and horrifying, borderline. And I don't know how you judge value in that situation. I mean, I'm probably whatever. I'll probably get in trouble a little bit for saying this, but like Griffin, you actually looked at a watch earlier this year by Laurent Ferrier that was like a steel $80,000 watch, something like that. I don't know how they charge that, but if there's people willing to buy it, then that's how they charge it, kind of, but that's double the price of a solid gold watch with an in-house movement by many other brands. So it's like, where is that discrepancy? I don't know.
But to, offer the flip side, it's also about the same price as one of the most talked about watches of last year, which is the Cubitus calendar watch, is also around $80,000. So you can make the argument in either direction. And I'm not knocking on the Cubitus. I haven't actually gotten to see.
You're
that
allowed
watch
to
in
knock the
person,
Cubitus on this podcast,
but
as well as the Patek customer, because that is a person who's actively not seeking value.
Yeah,
but
yeah, it's like when you put watches in comparison to other watches, it always gets harder.
It does.
Zach, when you texted me about doing this podcast yesterday, I was like, well, let's see what are some weird comps that are out there right now. I was like, okay, well, the Rolex 1908 that they introduced 2 or 3 years ago, cost like $24,000. And I went on Chrono 24 and you can get a yellow gold dress watch from Breguet for under 10. So all of a sudden, does that necessarily make the Rolex a bad buy, or is it just for a different person?
Right. Yeah. I mean, the Laurent Ferrier is a really interesting one because it's a very high asking price that I'm not sure anyone has ever actually paid, so that's another thing to keep in mind, like similar, to the where we started the conversation with Vertex, like the price on the website, because of the VAT, value added tax is like not the price you end up paying. I imagine, a Laurent Ferrier customer is probably going to negotiate, a discount when they're purchasing a watch that they're asking $80,000 for, but still, there are collectors out there who I imagine place such a high value just on the name Laurent Ferrier and for like the particular type of movement they're making, that they're willing to pay that asking price because that particular thing is of value to them. It's not like, to me, I find it like it seems like an astronomical price, but that's not the type of collector that I am.
Yeah,
and
I guess it's there's always something, right? Like you can always you can find something that where are you, above it or below it? If you're looking up at the prices, maybe then it's easier to judge what a value is. And, I think Laurent Ferrier is an interesting example because I think all three of us, right, like they're gorgeous watches, right? And like, I think I would love to own one. At the price points that they begin at new, it's not even something I think about.
Yeah.
It's, and that's fine too. You don't have to own everything. That's another, but whatever. It's all just comparing. I don't even know where I'm going with this.
You're above it, or you're below it, or you're on that rooftop party with the Patek Philippe and that Instagram reel, and you're just being showered with praise for being a millennial with a Cubitus, and it's quite a thing.
You just got your first job, so you're given an $80,000 watch. It's all natural. It's natural stuff.
That's what that was what happened to me when I got my first.
Would that it were so simple.
Yeah.
But Zach, I mean, you mentioned this with your Lange, and we haven't really touched on the idea of the secondary market either. And we've been focusing a lot on what brands are asking us to pay for things. And I think while that can feel a little skewed sometimes, I think the secondary market, broadly speaking, still does a really good job of pricing watches. Sure. And you'll see stuff from even massive brands that all of a sudden are selling for 50, 60, 70% of retail on Chrono 24 or eBay or wherever platform you want to use all day, every day.
Yeah, and it's disingenuous, honestly, of me to talk about an MSRP because I would never buy anything at full price, And I don't mind pre-owned watches either. I don't mind scratches and whatever. They lived a life. The Lange I got, I actually sent it in for service. I'm not going to see it for a long time, but I mean, I knew that was going to happen, and it's just part of the deal but it still is well under the cost of a new one, which I wouldn't have been able to buy at all.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, I totally agree, Griffin. That is the reality. That's the collector reality.
Yeah.
It's like this. There's abstraction and reality. Yeah.
Guys, this has been a fun conversation. I think like we could probably talk for hours about like perceived value, and I actually had like a couple of specific watches I wanted to discuss that I didn't get to. I think we'll save that maybe for like part 2 of this discussion, or maybe a piece of editorial on the website, because I think that there's a lot here, and I look forward to seeing our audience's reaction and to get them in on the conversation, because like we said, I think one of us said it, I think it was me at the beginning of the year, that like conversation about pricing is going to like be a thing like in 2025 as prices continue to go up, and about 2 months in, I think it definitely is. So I'm sure we'll return to this at some point.
Also, I really need to figure out how I define microbrand one of these days.
Yeah, we'll do that.
I think it's an assignment for this year for everyone. Just like, at least so if I'm asked, I can answer what my answer is, not the answer, just my answer. Right?
Yeah, I think that's a really like, I don't know, like important question for us to kind of like grapple with, is like, what is a microbrand? And I've sort of been working in the background on a just a project to kind of like define that, and ask brands what what they think of as a microbrand, and versus an independent, and so that'll come at some point. But I think it's a big conversation, because people have all sorts of different thoughts on what it means to be called a microbrand versus an independent, and so it's complicated. So
microbrand, it's complicated.
That's the title of the piece. Microbrand, it's complicated. It's cultural recommendations time. This is my new favorite part of the show. People stopping me on the street, telling me, thank you for recommending here a fantastic book. I don't have a book this week. I have a movie that I watched last night. So you guys are aware of like this asteroid that's gonna like maybe hit us in 2032, 3% chance, which is 30 to 1 shot, and those come in all the time, as we know. So I think it's probably going to happen. I really wanted to watch Deep Impact last night. It wasn't streaming on any service that I have, so I had to settle for, but it's not actually settling because it's great. The movie Greenland. Have you guys seen Greenland?
No.
This is
heard of it.
This is a movie starring Gerard Butler. Of course, this is the second Gerard Butler movie I recommended in this section of the podcast, by the way. And Morena Baccarin, who is a personal favorite of mine. And they play parents fleeing an asteroid that's gonna end the world. And of course they're trying to get to Greenland, which is where the giant bunker is. This movie's so relevant because, of course, we're going to be hit by an asteroid in 2032, 30 to 1 shot, which means it's probably going to happen. And apparently I've heard that we're considering buying Greenland. So
Red, White, and Blue Land, I believe, is what they're looking to call it now.
It's interesting. I'll just note, in this movie, the United States had not bought Greenland. Greenland just let us use a bunker, on their land. So it is possible to have some diplomacy in the event of a planet-ending disaster. But this is actually like a pretty fun action movie. It has like some pretty pretty well thought out like set pieces. There are a number of scenes where the little kind of like mini asteroids seem to just have like incredible aim, like in the way that they hit cars and people, coming from like, millions of miles away, and they end up like, hitting that character's car perfectly at just the right moment. But it's a fun disaster movie. And it's a fun Gerard Butler performance. It's streaming on Max right now. So if you got asteroid fever, I recommend Greenland. It's fun. So
Gerard Butler is quietly one of the most consistent action movie stars we have right now.
He's pretty good, I have to
I
say.
feel like every 18 months or 2 years, something comes out that's just like Gerard Butler on a plane, Gerard Butler in the White House, Gerard Butler robbing diamond exchanges in Europe, and it's always fun.
Yep, agreed. It's but just you know what you're gonna get with Gerard
Yeah.
Butler. It's kind of like there's a certain safety in it. Zach, you got a cultural rec for us this week?
Sure, going to a movie as well. One I just watched a couple of days ago for the first time. It is 1997's Cure, which is a Japanese not sci-fi, Japanese serial killer horror movie by Kiyoshi Kurosawa, who also created the film Pulse. So this is kind of I read a little bit up on it after I watched it, but it's sort of considered like the first of the wave of sort of Japanese horror movies that were really popular then, became really popular after. But it's much more psychological than some of the other ones. Like there's no, I don't want to give anything away. Frankly, it's a very interesting movie, beautifully shot, really enjoyable, and very, very different. Some gruesome moments. I wouldn't call it scary per se, but just a very, very a unique film, and it was just incredibly enjoyable. I don't know. So if you're into that kind of thing, it's on Criterion currently.
Cool. Definitely
worth watching. Yeah,
definitely check that out. I'm not familiar with that movie, but I do like Pulse. Pulse is a good film. So
yeah, I think I saw Pulse and like
good recommendation. Griffin, what have you got?
Well, I also have a movie for you. I just rewatched this yesterday. It's a 2015 movie called Sleeping with Other People. And it was directed by Leslie Headland before Russian Doll. And it's a rom-com, but it's kind of it doesn't feel very over the top, but it's wildly funny, and it's about two characters played by Jason Sudeikis and Alison Brie, who, when they were in college, had a one-night stand and lost their virginity to one another. And then, like, a decade later, run into each other in adulthood and like use each other to sort out their own crap and all the stuff that all the bad habits they've learned in the 10 years since. And it's just really charming and fun. I kind of had forgotten how much I like this movie. And then I got pinned on the couch by our dog yesterday and was kind of flipping through looking for something that I could turn on and turn off in a few minutes when she got off me and let me go. And I wound up sitting there for the whole movie. It's got Jason Mantzoukas and Andrea Savage and Natasha Lyonne and Adam Scott. So it's a lot of really funny people.
That's a good cast.
And I think, like, not all of it, but I think a good chunk of it is improvised, and it feels like that. It's the kind of movie that doesn't really seem to get made right now, and when it does get made right now, it's not done well. So it's kind of refreshing to revisit.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that one, but it has a good, like, I like everyone that you mentioned in that cast. Jason Mantzoukas is hysterical. So I'll watch anything with him in it. And yeah, that sounds good. Is it streaming on a platform that is like readily accessible?
I think I maybe watched it on Stars through Prime, but it seems to be streaming in a couple places at any given time.
I'm a fan of Alison Brie as well. I haven't seen the trailer for that because I know there might not be one yet, but apparently her and her husband, Franco, I forgot which his first name is. It's not James, the other one.
Oh, yeah.
Dave Franco. Dave Franco. It's like a new body horror film that has been getting good reviews thus far. So excited to see where that goes.
Glad that body horror
she's awesome. She's awesome.
Yeah, no, she's very good. Body horror having a moment. Substance nominated for Academy Awards. It's really
best movie I saw last year.
Yeah, it's really good. It's right up there. It's the top 3 for me, for sure. Standing cultural recommendation for The Substance. A fantastic movie. Griffin, Zach, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This was a really fun discussion. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Always a pleasure.
And thank you all for listening. We always appreciate it. And we will be back next week with another new episode of the podcast. Until then, take care.